Hi, this is Mike Fry, and I'm coming to you from my home office in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm thrilled to be here today talking to you about one of my favorite programs of the no-kill equation, pet retention. And I like to start with a little bit of humor. Those of us who have worked in animal shelters at the front lines, at the intake desk, can totally relate to this graphic that reads, Rufus returns his owner because she keeps having babies, and Rufus is saying, we don't know how she gets out. Yeah, that sounds about like many of the stories we hear, just in reverse. Got a few more in case you haven't seen these. Rover returns his owner because he's too big. He was so little when we got him. Rufus returns his owner because she sheds. It's everywhere, even in our food. Rufus returns his owner because he's moving. They don't allow humans where we're going. And Rover returns his owner because he disobeys. We even sent him to obedience school. Now, there's a reason these seem humorous, because they really are just turning around in reverse what we see at the adoption desks every day for those who've worked in animal shelters. And as we're going to learn as we go through today's presentation about pet retention, there's also a reason they sound ridiculous, because fundamentally they're not true. There's a reason they sound silly, they sound like excuses, because they're not the real reasons people typically are trying to get rid of their pets. And we'll talk about more about that later. The other thing we're talking about is the importance of pet retention, and how keeping animals in the homes where they belong and where people love them is one of the most crucial things that we can do in animal shelters or at animal control centers, because one of our crucial roles is to teach people responsible pet stewardship. So that's a premise that we're going to operate under today, that if we're doing our jobs well in animal shelters and at animal control, we will be modeling and teaching responsible pet stewardship. And if anybody disagrees that that's part of our job, or a core part of our job, then maybe you should get off the webinar right now, because that's what this whole thing is all about. And the other thing that we need to understand is that people learn less from what we tell them. They learn more from what we do. So, for example, studies have shown that children will learn about 7% of what they learn from what their parents tell them. They learn the rest from watching their parents live their lives. Now, think about that in the context of what are we teaching our children if we are surrendering their pets. I will just have a note about timing. I could literally do a 3-hour workshop at least, or 4-hour topic, but we're going to try to do this in about 30 minutes, because we're all busy people and you're watching this on the internet, and so we're going to try to get it done in about 30 minutes. But no, there's a lot more to this topic than what we're going to cover here today. I also believe it might be one of the most important programs of the no-kill equation, and we'll talk more about why that is as we go through this seminar. It's important to note, I think, that all the research that we have seen shows that children who learn compassion toward animals grow up to be more intelligent, they're more empathetic, and they tend to form healthier relationships later in life. So what does it teach our kids if the family so easily dumps those kids' best friends? You know, there hasn't been a lot of research on that, but I think the reverse side of the equation clearly shows us that positive responses, positive interactions with their pets have all these great benefits. There's got to be some damage or harm that is caused if we are separating them from what is oftentimes those kids' best friends. And so what we've got to do is stop and ask ourselves, is that something that we in animal shelters want to participate in? Unless it's an absolute emergency, last resort sort of situation, do we want to participate in and enable the damage and harm that could be caused to those kids by separating them from their pets? Now, of course, there's not always children involved, but very oftentimes there is, and I would argue There's oftentimes a spouse or other family members involved as well, and they might not all agree that getting rid of the pet is the thing to do. So someone is very oftentimes being harmed or damaged or hurt when animals are surrendered to animal shelters. And it also sends a message and teaches our community something if the pet animal shelter is not treating that incidence of the pet coming to the shelter, if they're not treating it as an actual emergency. So if we're saying, in effect, to people, we believe pets are like family, they're wanting to get rid of a family member, and then we just simply have clerks standing at the counter checking little boxes on a form and taking the pet as though it's a routine daily activity that is of no real import. So I'm just going to say, that whole model of having untrained clerks checking boxes on a form at the intake counter, I think animal shelters, in my opinion, need to throw that model entirely and completely out the window and be done with it. Because if that is a really crucial, life-altering event for that family, it needs to be treated with some sense of seriousness. And what we'll find, and if you do the same thing, if you have trained staff at the intake area, and you ask important follow-up questions of the people wanting to surrender pets, what you're going to find is that the first reason they'll typically find out that the first reason they give you for wanting to surrender the pet isn't the actual reason. They're not being completely honest with you. And it's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're wanting to lie. It's just that there's usually something going on under the surface in their family that they don't want to talk to you about. They probably feel like it's none of your business. And why should you care? Why should you be involved? But I think it's important that you be involved because there's this vicious cycle that occurs. I think most people would probably agree, most people who work in animal shelters would agree that most pet problems are not really pet problems, they're people problems. And so how is getting rid of the pet going to solve the people problem? The answer, of course, is that it's not going to solve the problem. And this little circle here shows exactly how I think it happens. It starts up at the top. The person in some way, shape, or form, or family, creates a behavior or medical issue with the pet. They blame the pet for the issue that they themselves created, so they surrender it to the shelter. In effect, the people learn nothing. They get another pet, create the same problem, and we are participating in this endless, nonstop cycle of pets coming into shelters for reasons that are not the pet's fault. And it should be our job at the intake desk to do our darndest to break that cycle, keep the pet in their home, and prevent the harm and damage that is done to families in the process. According to research from Maddie's Fund, there are about 60% of the people who are coming to your shelter with their pets to surrender them that are technically reachable. There's about 40% that aren't. But I would argue this. Based on our current knowledge, our current technology, that might be true. I think that we need to continue working to improve that 60%, and I think that that is a reachable goal. We need to just simply deploy more and more resources and do more and more learning to get better at how we have these conversations with people and get better about solving their problems for them. And we have to remember that oftentimes, we're dealing with families that are in crisis, and we need to treat them as families that are in crisis. They're looking at giving up a family member. That's a crisis. That's emergency. And they're not necessarily wanting to come to us and talk to us about the crisis that is in their family. Fundamentally, in effect, what I'm telling you is that I believe we not only need to be good at veterinary care, sanitation at our shelters, animal behavior, fundraising, marketing, we need to also become, in effect, social workers, because we are dealing with families in crisis whether we recognize them or not. Sometimes it's overt and we know it, but oftentimes there's a family crisis underneath, behind the scenes, that we're not detecting, and part of our job is to figure that out. And of course, if there is a real violence in the home, or there's abuse happening in the home, we need to identify that, because those animals need to come to the shelter immediately, and we need to do whatever we can to get the other people in the home to the resources that they need to get past it. Fundamentally, I would just argue this, that they don't need us to check boxes on a form and take their pet. What they really need is a non-judgmental, heartfelt response, an intervention, so to speak, to get to whatever the issue is in that family so that it can be fixed. And that can look like a whole host of different things. I'll give you one example that I can think of, very vividly. At Animal Arc, I was at working the intake desk, and a woman came to me with this beautiful cat that she was wanting to surrender. And you'll probably all recognize the story. We've heard it 1,000 times probably, but the cat was urinating outside the litter box, subsequent responses back to her, to the person wanting to surrender the cat, who she clearly loved. We went through the whole retraining process, the odor elimination products, and all that kind of stuff that we're going to talk about in a little bit. She was reluctant. You could tell she wanted to give the programs a try, but she said she was engaged and her fiance wouldn't let her. The fiance didn't really want the cat, and so she was going to need to get rid of it. And at this point, the woman is crying. She's having just a really emotional kind of breakdown about getting rid of this beloved cat whom she'd had for like 10 years. And so I asked her point blank, does your husband-to-be know how much you love this cat? And does your husband-to-be know how important this cat is to your life? And she said he did. And I turned around and asked her, point blank, so when in your relationship did you decide that you don't get a say about that? And she immediately had a strong emotional response, you can imagine, to a question like that. And she started crying harder, and she acknowledged that in fact she had decided that she didn't get a say, and that it was not in her best interest to continue and pursue a relationship where she didn't get a say about something in her life that was really crucially important. And the end result of that was that she purchased our odor eliminating product. She committed to retraining her cat. She realized that very likely the cat had become territorial when this person came into her life that didn't like her cat. And why is she trying to hook up herself with a person who didn't respect her wishes, didn't respect her family? And she said, I'm going home. I'm telling him this is how it is. We're retraining the cat. He's going to learn to like my cat, or he's not going to be here. And she gave the shelter a $500 donation and bought all of our products. And ultimately, that pet was kept in its home. And let me tell you, that woman is going to have a better life as a result of her keeping her commitment to her cat. If she had surrendered the cat, I guarantee you, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a counselor, but I can guarantee you that is not the starting foundation of a healthy relationship. And, to have it based on her having to get rid of her cat that she loved in order to have this relationship with this guy. So there's a lot of questions that we need to ponder as we think about this issue. Is the pet safe in its current situation? Obviously, if it's not, it needs to be brought into the shelter immediately. Is there an issue that can actually be corrected, even if the family believes they've already tried everything? There might be actually something they haven't tried, and we might still be able to fix it, even if they believe they've already tried everything. And ultimately, has the bond for the pet been completely severed at this point, or is there still something left that you can work with? Because if there's still a bond there and they still feel that connection, you've got something to work with, and you might be able to engage them in these constructive options. And And I'll say this, there's a really great technique that you can use to find out before you even get into any of the nitty-gritty about, what's going on and probing about what's happening in the family environment for why they're getting rid of the pet. When you start the interview, you can just, start praising the pet, saying, oh, what a beautiful cat it is, or beautiful dog it is, how well behaved they are, how nice they are. And you can start asking them questions that cause them to reflect back on some of their favorite experiences. Tell me, why did you get this cat in the first place? What did you like most about living with this dog? Asking them to recall the positive aspects that they had with that relationship. And the way they answer those questions will, number one, help inform you about what is their bond with this pet really like, and is there something there that you can work with. It'll also provide tools for you later in the conversation, because if they've started to reconnect to that part of their pet that they love, it's going to be easier to re-engage them in looking for solutions to their problem later. So all that's got to be part of your early intervention process. A typical scenario that I see when I do work at the intake counter actually revolves around simple things that many of us don't even think about oftentimes in animal shelters. And I'll just, put out there that I think, the foods that we are feeding our pets are causing dramatic problems. They cause, especially with cats, a large number of cats to come into our shelters. Just pick up your typical bag of kibble cat food and read the ingredients lists and look at what actually cats are supposed to eat. According to most naturopathic, veterinarians, they will tell you cats are obligate carnivores that are designed to get the majority of their moisture from their food. So feeding them dry, crunchy kibble that's made out of ground yellow corn, chicken byproduct meal, corn gluten meal, soybean meal, whole wheat, and all of these chemicals and junk is not good for them. I guarantee you it's just not good for them. And I think we as a sheltering industry have not quite yet realized the profoundly negative impact these crummy foods are having on cats. And oftentimes that the impact that it has is inflammation. Inflammation of the GI, all through the urinary tract, not necessarily infections, not necessarily crystals, but it can cause enough irritation that they will start urinating outside the litter box. People will take those cats to the vet. Vet can't find an infection because there isn't one. They can't find crystals because there aren't any. But it doesn't mean the food isn't causing a problem for those cats that is causing them to urinate outside the litter box. And so, starts out with they're feeding crummy food. Veterinarian can't find anything. Cat's urinating outside the litter box. Vet says cat's healthy. But then there's urine dribbled all over the house in various places, and you know what happens then? Then it becomes a mixture of medical and behavior, and someone in the family says that cat's got to go, and there it is at the shelter. And the real issue, oftentimes, by the way, when they come, they won't say the cat's peeing all over. They want to tell you something different because they think if it's peeing outside the litter box, you're going to kill the cat. And so they're going to come in and say, well, we're moving, or my kids are allergic, or some other thing. They think they're going to go through this simple little process. You're going to check the boxes on the form. They're going to be at your counter for 5 minutes, and they're going to walk away with their cat in your shelter. And it's your job to make sure that doesn't happen. You want to find out what's really going on with that cat. And when I hear urinating outside the litter box, if I'm working at the adoption or the intake desk, all I hear is donation coming, because I can usually solve that problem. And I can sell them all the products needed to fix the problem, and that's going to generate money for Animal Ark. It's going to keep the pet in their home, and we're going to solve the actual problem that these people are dealing with. One of my favorite things when people say they're moving, I'll say, "Oh, where are you moving?" And not like I'm like grilling them. I'll just say, "Oh, where are you moving? And what's blah blah blah?" And you'll be amazed how many people say, "Oh, we bought a house and so," or and you'll say, "Well, why are you not bringing your cat with you?" Well, then if you dig deep and deeper and deeper, you'll find out what's really going on, and then you've got something to work with. And I'll just say this. If the story you're hearing from these people doesn't make any sense at all, if it doesn't make sense, you don't know the real reason they're getting rid of their pet yet. What you need is a help desk. You don't need a blue solution. You need a help desk. And Animal Ark actually has started a system. If you go to animalarkshelter.org, in the upper right corner of our website, you can see our animal help desk. It's built in such a way that you can integrate it into your own website. And when you go there, you can see a list of helpful resources for helping pets stay in their homes. You can integrate it into your own website. And you need to become experts at, helping people solve their problems. All of the products you see on the screen here are ones that we use to help people, for example, with litter box issues. And we've got a protocol on our website and our help desk that helps people walk their way through solving that problem. And it's nearly 100% successful, regardless of what the problem is that the cat has. If you follow the protocol, you will detect what the problem is and you'll be able to fix it, and you will be able to sell the products that are necessary to get that done. Food, odor eliminator, feel away, cat attract, special litter, all this stuff. It's all money in your pocket, and you've saved a life, and you've kept a family together. I would argue it might be less dramatic to sell products like this at your shelter. It's maybe more dramatic to take animals in and feel like you're rescuing them, but it might be a better service to the community to become an expert in solving these problems and then selling the products that will fix their problem. This is what our help desk looks like online. Currently, you can look for issues related to cats, dogs, or all of the above. And it's not only just solving problems, it's also got some good training advice, including YouTube videos and other resources available to help pets out. The really good thing about a good pet retention program is that it keeps pets out of your shelter, keeps families together, and it brings cash into your shelter. All of those things are really important. What other program can you implement that will keep pets out of your shelter while generating revenue for your organization, and while teaching people to actually solve problems with their pets? I mean, again, our job is to model responsible pet stewardship and stand for that, not to simply make it easy for people to get rid of pets. Our job is to solve the actual problems that people are experiencing so that we can become good stewards of our pets and help our community become better at that. I could talk about pet retention programs for hours. That's a quick overview, but begin exploring. There's a lot of good programs out there, and dive in. And thanks for your attention, and thanks for your work.